Connor a text on Friday, and I said, hey, I'm going to send you the sermon because I don't know what to think about it. And he goes, everything okay? What happened? I said, no, I've just been sick for a few days, and Revelation 6, being prepared with a head full of NyQuil and cough drops probably makes for an interesting experience. So either A, this is going to be the most interesting sermon in Revelation you've ever heard, or B, I just saw one of the horsemen and thought I was going to, do this well. So be praying for me. My voice is not the best today. I've been dealing with some just throat issues, just kind of feeling scratchy, don't know what's going on. And of course, Renee is gone this weekend, so I have not been able to be nursed back to health. So just appreciate your prayers. But speaking of Revelation, if you do have your Bibles, we are going to be in Revelation chapter 6. Revelation 6, we saw Revelation 5 last week on Easter. And I don't know about you, but man, I loved our Easter service last week. I felt the Spirit move. I loved it. I saw more people here than I've ever seen before. I finally beat Jacob and Adam on attendance. Their youth Sunday had 205, and I had 223. So I finally won. That's all I cared about. I'm kidding. But reality is, all of our services last week during Holy Week were special. And if you weren't here for the Good Friday service in particular, I just want to tell you that you missed out. You missed out on an amazing service where we got to sing to the Lord and reflect on what Christ has done. We got to hear from His Word about how Christ is the final atoning sacrifice for sin. And then we took communion together as a church family. After reflecting and asking if we were worthy to take it, we took it, and then we left here excited for Easter. So Friday was an amazing day, but Friday wasn't just an amazing day because of the Good Friday service, but something special got to happen in Renee and I's life on Friday. We got to go to our doctor's appointment and got to see little Jonathan's full profile for the first time. We got to see his little legs, his little arms. He's a boy. We got to see everything else going on there. Some of you will get that in the ride home. But it was awesome. And it was so amazing to finally see him because Renee has got to feel him. Renee has felt him grow inside of her. Renee has nourished him. So Renee already kind of knows him, and I'm kind of left out. I mean, I don't get to feel him. I don't get to experience him. And so when I saw that picture, when I saw the ultrasound, it kind of hit me. This isn't somebody else's kid. This is my kid. This isn't somebody else's baby. This is my son. So yes, fear did set in at that moment when I realized he's really mine. But also it kind of took me aback a little bit. It startled me. And in that moment on Friday morning, things got real quick for me. Because when Renee first told me she was pregnant, we thought we've got like 7.5 months. It's okay. It's not anytime soon. We'll get there when we get there. Now we're at 22 weeks, and y'all, that due date is barreling down on us, and I am nervous. Like, things got real when I saw that ultrasound, and you might know what I'm talking about. It may not be with a child, but we have this tendency to take dates off in the future and kind of shelf them. Like, we don't really think about them. We think we'll get to them when we get to them, but eventually those dates come barreling down on us like nobody's business. For instance, when you were a freshman in high school and you thought about graduating, that just seemed so far off in the future. That just seemed so far off. It was going to take forever to get there. And then your senior year comes and you realize, oh, this date's coming a lot faster than I planned on. Things have a tendency to get real quick, and we have a tendency to procrastinate. We have a tendency to kind of put them off, and we'll deal with them when the time comes. But when the time actually comes, we don't really feel ready. We don't really feel ready to tackle it because we haven't prepared ourselves before we had to. We weren't ready. We weren't prepared. And now the date's coming and we can't change it. And is this not what we do when it comes to the return of Christ? I mean, we think about Jesus' second coming. We go, yes, that's going to happen way in the future. May not happen in my lifetime. I'll deal with it when it actually starts to happen. But right now, we don't think about it. But right now, we're not preparing for it. We think it's something so far distant in the future that we kind of don't preoccupy ourselves with getting ready. But that day is coming, and it's coming a lot sooner than we realize. And when that day comes, if we're not getting ready now, will we be ready when the day actually is here? Can we really say that we're ready for the return of Christ if we're not getting ready right now? And I'm not talking about getting your charts out or starting becoming doomsday preppers. I'm not talking about that. I mean, are we living right now to be ready for the day when Christ returns? Or are we going to wait until that day actually comes? When that day actually comes and we haven't prepared ourselves, if we haven't spent time getting ready for this day, you know what will happen? You won't stand. You won't be as well off as you think you might be. So when this day comes, things are going to get real quick. When the Lamb begins to open the 7 seals on the scroll, things are going to get real. And if we're not taking efforts to get ready right now, if we're not getting ready today, then you won't be ready when this day comes. And when that day comes, you're going to wonder, who will sustain me? How in the world do I stand on this great day? And the only way we can hope to stand is by remembering Christ who sustains us. Revelation 6 is where we see things get real. The end times begin. The seals are broken. The scroll is opened. And what we see from this is not a text for us to take and start making charts about. We're not to take this text and start theorizing what it means, but we're to remember what Revelation is all about. Revelation is all about Jesus. It's the revelation of Jesus about Jesus to John. Jesus is the one who gave him this revelation. So we read Revelation 6 and we don't think of Jesus, we've read it wrong. Because Revelation 6 is here to remind us that only Jesus can sustain us. And if we're going to get ready now, not just keep postponing it until that day, but we want to get ready today, we have to remember him. We have to remember that he sustains us. As we look at these 6 seals in chapter 6, well, we notice that we can group them into 3 different categories, 3 different groups, if you will. We can break it into 3 sections, and in these 3 sections, we see different ways that we remember Christ in our day-to-day life. And in seals 1 through 4, we see that we remember Christ by resisting our temptations. Remember Christ by resisting our temptations. Let's look at verses 1 through 8 of Revelation 6. Then I saw the Lamb open one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider held a bow. A crown was given to him, and he went out as a conqueror in order to conquer. When he opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, "Come." Then another horse went out, a fiery red one, and its rider was allowed to take peace from the earth, so that people would slaughter one another. And a large sword was given to him. When he opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a set of scales in his hand. Then I heard something like a voice among the 4 living creatures say, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. But do not harm the oil and the wine." When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and there was a pale green horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following after him. They were given authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill by the sword, by famine, by plague, and by the wild animals of the earth. So here we are in Revelation. We get to the all-infamous 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I mean, you don't have to be a believer to have known about the 4 horsemen. It's in secular media. It's all throughout our culture. People know about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and so we're finally getting to see them and look at them. Now, what we have to ask is simply this. Are we going to see 4 literal horsemen come out of a seal and start doing all these things? Is that literally what we're going to see? One person nodded no, so good job. I'll give that one person credit today. But remember, Revelation is symbolic. It's apocalyptic literature, meaning when an image is given, it means something. So what do these 4 horsemen represent? They represent this. Things are going to get really, really bad when this seal is opened. Man's depravity is no longer going to be limited like it is now. I mean, think about that. Why aren't things as bad as they can be at this very moment? Because we have infinite room for disprovement when it comes to our own sin. Why is it that things aren't as bad as they possibly can be right now? It's because the sovereign God of all creation puts a limit on it. The sovereign God of all creation puts a limit on how depraved man can really get. We have infinite room for disprovement. We can get infinitely worse than we are now, but things aren't the worst because of God's grace in this earth. So what happens when the 4 horsemen come? What happens when these scrolls are opened? God's removing his grace from the earth. things are about to get real rough. And we see first this white horse. This first seal comes a white horse who is given the ability to conquer. He comes to conquer, and he's sent out as a conqueror. Now we read about this white horse, and we might think, well, this is Jesus. Because later on in Revelation, we see another white horse, and we know that white horse is Jesus. So this has to be the same horse, but it's not. But the imagery here is used intentionally because this is going to be a messianic imposter. Someone who's going to claim power. Someone who's going to claim authority. Someone who's going to claim the right to conquer and go out to conquer. But it's not Jesus. Because when Jesus conquers, he's not limited in what he conquers. And so this white horse comes. He's given a bow. A crown was given to him. He goes out to conquer in order to conquer. And what this horse represents is the innate desire in all of mankind to conquer. I mean, look at the world around us to now. What happens when one country wants to expand its borders a little bit? It wants to conquer. See, every person has this innate desire to win and to conquer. And when this seal is broken, it's going to be insatiable. Nations are going to rage. Nations are going to want more. There's going to be the spirit of conquering the world has never seen before. And when this horseman comes, it leads to the next one. Because whenever there's a hunger to conquer, there's always going to be. When there's a desire to conquer, there's always going to be destruction. Look at the next horse in the second seal. He opened the second seal, and I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another horse went out, a fiery red one, representing destruction and war. This is not what's happening today. Look around you. Rumors of war, war to conquer, war to expand borders. We see this right now, but when this seal is broken, so much worse. Death like we've never seen before. War like we've never seen before. And whenever there's a desire to conquer, whenever there is destruction, there's always devastation. And we see the black horse. This one had a scale in his hand. And there's a voice from the throne saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, but do not harm the oil and the wine." So this represents famine, devastation, destitution, if you will. Because what always happens when there's a desire to conquer? There's always destruction and war. And what always happens from war? Inflation. Prices get so high, people can't afford it. They can't get food for their families. They can't provide for themselves, and they're left destitute. They're devastated. And whenever you have a desire to conquer, met with destruction from war, which leads to devastation from the war and the famine, there's always going to be death. The pale green horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following after him, and they were given authority over 1/4 of the earth. Now notice there's a limitation put here. So even though the seals are being broken, things are about to go from bad to worse real quick in this creation, there's still a limit on what they can do. It goes to show that God is judging man, yes, but he's still putting a limit because the time has not yet come. We still got trumpets and bowls to deal with. Things only escalate from here, but these 4 horsemen represent this. Man's own self-inflicted judgment on himself. We have this desire to conquer, so we go and we cause destruction. And when there's destruction, there's devastation, and there's always death. And notice, we're not told that God put this desire in anyone. And we can think about how this is going to happen later, but don't we have these same desires now? Don't we have a desire to win? I mean, isn't everything in life about winning? I mean, look at the way we talk about our marriages. When we fight with our spouses, what are we always worried about? We want to win. Or the joke is that women always win and men don't. But we always talk about winning in our relationships, winning in our marriage, winning in our family, winning at our jobs, winning in church even. Because all of us have an innate desire to want to conquer. And it's not new. It's existed from Genesis chapter 3. Because in Genesis 3, when God is punishing the serpent, the woman, and the man, what does he tell the woman? Your desire will be for your husband, yet he shall rule over you. And right there we see this curse. We see the brokenness. The wife is going to desire to rule over her husband, to win, to be in control. And the husband is going to want to win too. So he's going to rule over her. They're going to be fighting constantly, both with a desire to conquer and to win. What was once to love and to cherish is now to control and dominate. We all have this desire. We all want to win. I mean, nobody likes to lose. We want to feel like we're winning in every area of life. We want to win in our marriages, in our relationships, with our friends, with our family. We want to win in everything. But can I just tell you this? Pursuing this desire to win will not lead you to any kind of satisfaction. It won't lead you to any kind of peace. It won't lead you to anything good. For the first 4 years of our marriage, which, by the way, if you're doing the math, we've almost been married for 5 years, so I'm saying for like the bulk of our marriage, you know what my goal was? I was going to be the first man in the history of mankind to not lose when I argue with my wife. Thanks, Jay. That was a goal, man. I didn't want to lose. I wanted to win if I was right. And there were times where, I won the argument, but I never won. And that's not a joke. That's, how can I say I'm winning if I push Renee away when I win? If we make our marriages about winning, we make our relationships about winning, our jobs about winning, and everything's always about winning and conquering, can you really say you're winning when you're pushing everybody else away? Isn't that the very definition of losing? But we all have this desire in us. We want to win. And when we don't win, what happens? We get angry. We get mad. Might even get a little violent. Or we give into what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, that if you have hatred in your heart towards your brother, you've committed murder already. And eventually we get angry. We're destructive. But then our life is devastated. No one wants to be around us. Your job can't stand you. Your wife doesn't want to be around you anymore. Your kids can't stand the idea of you. Is that winning? No, that's having a devastated life. Inevitably, what does it lead to? Death. Could be physical. Could be the death of your marriage, death of your relationships, the death of your career. However you want to classify it, death always comes. This desire to conquer, this desire to win is not from the Lord. It's the result of our own brokenness. We shouldn't be a people who are concerned with winning. Why should we desire to win when Jesus has already won the victory? And so this desire in us is a daily temptation that we face. That's why if you want to get ready for the return of Christ, when these things become even more unhindered, that's why right now we have to resist these temptations. In your marriage, don't give in to the temptation to win, but redeem your marriage. In your family, don't give in the temptation to win, but redeem your family, redeem your job, redeem your career, redeem your relationships. Don't focus on winning. Resist that temptation because it won't lead to any kind of peace, any kind of security, any kind of satisfaction. It'll only lead to ruin. And so we resist that temptation. And how do we resist it? By remembering Jesus. Remembering that He is the conqueror. He has conquered sin, death, hell, and the grave. He conquered our sin at the cross. He conquered death through His resurrection. He has conquered. We don't have to conquer. We have to walk and stand next to Him. We have to walk in His victory, the victory He secured, the victory He's earned. We don't have to earn our own victory. Jesus already earned the greatest victory. And we walk in Him. Walk in His victory, resisting the desires of our flesh to win and to conquer and to destroy, and eventually we'll be devastated. We resist that temptation. We don't give in to it. Because if we can't resist it now, you won't resist it then. If you can't resist it now when there's a limit and when it's hindered, how will you resist when those desires are unhindered? You won't. And that's why now we have to resist this temptation. I'm just going to tell you this right now. Resisting this temptation is hard. It is difficult. And there will be days where you want to give up. There will be days where you'll wonder, this is so difficult to deny these desires in me. I should just give in to them. I mean, after all, I don't feel like God's taking them away from me. I've prayed, God, take away these desires. I've prayed, God, strengthen me. I keep being tempted. I keep feeling overwhelmed, so I'm just going to give in to them. I'm just going to give up. Because I just want God to take it away from me. Why hasn't He? You ever prayed that about your own sin? Why hasn't God just taken it away from me? And He will one day. And that day is when He comes. So while we struggle here, while we wrestle here, while we resist here, on those days where it feels impossible to resist, we must remember Christ by resting in His timing. Look at this fifth seal. When He opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slaughtered because of the word of God and the testimony they had given. They cried out with a loud voice, Lord, the one who is holy and true, how long until you judge those who live on the earth and avenge our blood? So they were given a white robe, and they were told to rest a little while longer until the number would be completed of their fellow servants and their brothers and sisters who were going to be killed just as they had been. Now, this fifth seal might seem very different from the first four, but this is an escalation. One seal always leads to the next. And so the result of a society that wants to conquer, that's destructive, that leaves devastation, that results in death, do you know what happens? The church feels it. And the church is persecuted because of it. Because you know what the world wants to conquer more than anything else? The church. The world wants to win against the church. And we see this because when He opens the fifth seal, He sees under the altar the souls of those who had been slaughtered. And the imagery John is using here, what he sees, should call us to think about what happens in Exodus 29, verses 10 through 14, and Leviticus 4, verses 3 through 12, where the bull was slaughtered and its blood was sprinkled over the altar in the same way as living sacrifices to God when we experience death for our faith, which is going to come. Let's stop talking about if it comes, when it does. Revelation teaches that this day is going to come. But we are also slaughtered, and our blood is over the altar. And we are a testimony of those who had not given in to the world, but remained in the Word. You might think that's a little bit of brutal imagery there. After all, I'm a Christian, but I don't want to suffer. I don't want to die for my faith. I mean, that's not what I want to do. That's not what I was called to do. But remember the words of Romans 12, verses 1 through 2 that Gwen read earlier. We are living sacrifices. This is our spiritual worship. And what did Jesus say in Mark 8, verse 34? If anyone wishes to follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. The call to follow Jesus has always been a call to die. To die to self, to die to our sin. And if and when it happens, to die as a living sacrifice. We don't talk about that a lot, do we? We live in America. We don't get persecuted for our faith. We get made fun of. We get called dumb. That's not persecution, but no one's being killed in America for being a believer. And if you think that day will never come, then wake up. It will. Eventually, the world is going to have an insatiable appetite to conquer the church. And right now, you might be able to say, you know, if that day comes, I'll stand and I'll give my life for Christ. If that day comes, I will lay my life down for Him. And look, I'm happy you think that way, but let's test it. Let's ask one very simple question to see if you really would or not. Do you die to yourself today? Do you die to your sin every day? Do you put to death the deeds of the body? Do you pursue Christ every single day and Christ is the center of your whole life? Well, no, I'm just really busy. Well, no, I got other things to do. Church is for Sunday and Wednesday if I'm feeling super holy. Then I hate to tell it to you, but if you can't die to self today, you will not die if someone says, choose Christ or your life. And you will deny him. I know that seems harsh, but it's the truth. Because right now, as we suffer as believers, as we go through whatever we go through now, do you know what we're always looking for? You know what we're always looking for day in and day out? Whenever we're suffering, whenever we're in pain, we're always looking for the quick and easy way out. If something's inconvenient, we look for the quick and easy way out. It's our whole pattern of life. When we suffer, when we're in pain, we want the quick and easy way out. We don't want to go through that. We don't want to go through pain. We don't want to go through suffering. We want the quick and easy way out. And if we want the quick and easy way out now, won't we want the quick and easy way out then? It's real easy to say right now that I would lay my life down should Christ demand it of me. It's another thing to die to self daily and prove it. So what are you doing? Are you dying to yourself? Are you dying to your sin daily? You might see the suffering and pain in this world, and because you are pursuing Christ, you might cry out the very same way that these believers cry out. They cry out like Habakkuk did in Habakkuk 1:2. How long, O Lord? Lord, the one who is holy and true, how long until you judge those who live on the earth and avenge our blood? And notice their cry is not blaming God or trying to force God to do anything, but they're saying, God, how much longer until you avenge your character? They don't want revenge for themselves. They want God to avenge his own character and his name. These are people who are chiefly concerned with the holiness and greatness of God. And only those who are concerned with the holiness of God will put to death the deeds of the body. Only those who take seriously 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 14 through 16, that as obedient children, we do not go back to the desires of our former ignorance. But as the one who has called you is holy, you also are to be holy. For it is written, be holy, for I am holy. Do we take that seriously? If not, we won't die to self. We won't die to sin. And we can't expect to say that we would if that day actually came. But these are people who are concerned with the holiness of God. And you ask such a question in Revelation, you would think they're going to have this powerful answer. God's going to answer and say, right now, I'm going to deal with them. But instead, they were given a white robe and they were told to rest a little while longer. Doesn't that just seem a little anticlimactic? Like this great cry of, how long, O Lord? And you would think God would answer and say, right now. But instead, he says, shh, just go back. It's okay. Rest a little bit. Kind of anticlimactic, but it shows us this. God's timing is always better than our timetable. We might cry out, God, how long am I going to go through this? How long will I suffer? How long will I go through this pain? How long is this trial going to go on? God, get me out of it. God, take me out of it. God, kill these desires that are in me. God, remove this temptation from me. And when he doesn't, we get mad. And when he doesn't remove us, and when the pain continues, and when the temptations keep coming, we get angry and we say, God, why haven't you done this? And instead, we have to remember that God's timing is better, and that trial is not here without a purpose. It is here to mold and to refine us. So we have a choice. In trials and in pain, we can try to find the quick and easy way out. We can try to find the quick and easy way out to just deal with it for a little bit, or we can turn to the Lord and say, I don't know what you're doing, but I trust that even though it might not be on my timetable, I trust your timing. And I trust what you're doing. And I trust that you're going to bring something out of it. But so often we try to force God's hand, don't we? We try to force God's timetable. We try to force him to do what we want him to do on our timetable when we expect him to do it. But it doesn't work that way. I remember when I was a student pastor in Mauda, Oklahoma. It was a small town in Oklahoma. It was my first position, and I was all excited about it. And about 8 months in, I wanted to leave. And I wanted to leave because it was brutal. Now granted, I'm going to own this now. I was super arrogant when I went in that position and thought, I'm a junior at Oklahoma Baptist University. I know everything. And that doesn't vibe well when you've got a pastor who wants to teach you something. And the pastor and I didn't get along, partly because of my arrogance, but also because we were so fundamentally different on all things theology and ministry. So we butted heads a lot. And I hated it. So about 8 months in, you know what I started to do? I sent resumes to anywhere within a 30-mile radius of Oklahoma Baptist University and said, please hire me. Please get me out of this. Now, you know what happened? Surprisingly, no one wanted to hire the junior from OBU with 8 months of youth ministry experience. Who'd have thunk? But no one wanted to hire me. I was getting frustrated. I was there for another 4 months, and I was mad at God. God, why wouldn't you move me? God, I'm miserable. God, come on, I need you to do this. I need you to work at my timetable. I don't want to go through this anymore. But eventually the Lord did move me. But I never would have gotten the opportunity that He had for me if I tried to force His hand. I got an opportunity to travel around the state and preach. And because of that, I was able to become an interim pastor at a church I still love today. Lynn Baptist Church, Pawhuska. They ordained me, they loved me, they tolerated me, and I loved them. But I never would have gotten that opportunity if I tried to force God's hand. His timing was perfect. His timing always is. So whatever you're going through, trial, tribulation, whatever it might be, whatever is causing you to cry out, how long, O Lord? Trust Him and rest in Christ's perfect timing. That He's going to do exactly what He's going to do, exactly when He's going to do it. Trust Him and rest in Him. Rest because He is going to answer this question in verse 10. Rest because He is going to bring all things to an end. And we need to ultimately remember that about Him. That He is going to come again. He is going to stand triumphant. And when we feel as though we can't take another step, we have to remember Christ by recognizing that He is triumphant. Look at this last seal that is opened in verse 12. Then I saw Him open the sixth seal. A violent earthquake occurred. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of hair. The entire moon became like blood. The stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its unripe figs when shaken by a high wind. The sky was split apart like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the nobles, the generals, the rich, the powerful, and every slave and free person hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, because the great day of their wrath has come. And who is able to stand? This sixth seal reminds us that Jesus will stand triumphant over every one of His enemies. Look at the language used here, the simile used here. It's like this, or it's as this. John can't even describe to us what he's seeing because it is so cataclysmic. Because when God moves against His enemies, all of creation is undone. When God moves against His enemies and He acts against them definitively once and for all creation is undone. The sky is rolled back like a scroll. The mountains and islands are moved from their place. And all of those who have rebelled, all of those, as we'll see later on, who refuse to repent, will then wonder, who can stand? Because this sixth seal is actually an insight into the future. It shows us the answer to the question in verse 10. How long, O Lord? And when He comes, His enemies will be humbled. His enemies will cry out and long for the mountains to fall on them and to crush them. For who can stand before the wrath of the Lamb? Who can stand before the wrath of God that has justly been poured out upon all the earth? Who is able to stand? Who can withstand this? Who can stand in this awful day? In chapter 7, we'll answer that question, but let me just give it to you now. Who was able to stand? The church. The church is able to stand. Because Christ does not return to conquer his bride. He comes to call his bride to be with him forever and to punish all her enemies. Every time anyone acts against the church, every time someone harms the bride of Christ, he sees it. And when he comes, there is no more invitation. And when he comes, there is no more grace. And when he comes, there is no more mercy. But every single person who has harmed, rebelled, and tried to conquer his church will be conquered on this day. They will stand before him wondering who is able to stand, who can withstand the great wrath of the Lamb. And the answer is the church. And all those who have hurt her, all those who have harmed her will be humbled. And don't think for a moment that just because you're within these four walls, that doesn't include you. Sometimes the worst enemies of the church are found in the church building. You might say, well, what makes you able to say that? Why would you say something like that? Because how often do we make church about winning? How often do we spit on the Word of God and say our traditions mean more? How often do we get so stubborn in our own preferences and our own desires that we use the church to accomplish our own selfish gains, our own selfish motives? And you don't think Christ takes note of that? And you don't think Christ is recording everything done against his bride and that you'll answer for it when he comes? Don't think because you're in these four walls that you're safe. You are only safe if you are covered by the blood of the Lamb. Being in a building does not save you. Being in a building does not prevent you from encountering Christ on this day, but being covered by his blood does. You don't stand on your church attendance. You don't stand on how long you've been here. You don't stand on how much you've tithed. You don't stand on how much you've done. You stand on what he has done. You stand on the blood or you don't stand. And when this day comes, every enemy will answer. And when this day comes, you'll either stand or you'll submit. Which one do you want to do? Do you want to be able to stand when this day comes? Do you want to stand when this day comes and all of creation is undone? Or do you want to be in the mountains begging them to fall on you? Because who can stand against the wrath of the Lamb? So let me invite you this morning. You don't have to submit because you can get ready right now. You don't have to wait till that day to figure it out because you can start to stand on the blood of the Lamb today. And you can do so by remembering him day in and day out. You can remember him by resisting your temptation to conquer. You can do so by resting in his good and perfect timing. And you can do so by recognizing that he is triumphant. That there will be none who are against him who will stand. And if you're not in Christ, that includes you. So do you want to stand or submit? Would you bow your head and close your eyes this morning, please?